Thank you, Jennifer, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you a little bit about Vroom. Some background for myself. I am the Vroom. I actually have a new title, but it was a bit too long to put on this presentation. So I'll tell you what it is. I'm the Vroom Activation and Help Me Grow Systems Manager for Public Health of Seattle and King County. And that's because my work now, I've been doing some work with Vroom for the past year and a half or so, and it's now evolving to incorporate some of the work that the Best Starts for Kids initiative in King County is going to be doing moving forward. But for the purposes of this webinar, we are going to focus solely on Vroom and really try to make it very useful for you and in your groups and in the work that you're doing in communities and hopefully with your loved ones and others as well. I have to click that. Oh, thank you. All right, so a few objectives for today's webinar are to just make sure that you're familiar with and comfortable with the Vroom resource and understand that it has value to parents and caregivers as a tool for brain building, definitely a tool for development. And there's a lot of scientific principles that went into the creation of this tool, which we're going to focus quite a bit of our time on today. I'm hoping that those connections will be very relevant to the work that you do and that you'll see ties into things that are already existing in our communities. And then I'm also hoping that you'll be able to figure out some ways that Vroom can be utilized and promoted in your play and learn groups and the other work that you're doing with parents, caregivers, and other members of the community. All right, so just for background, I'll preface this statement about what is Vroom. Let me adjust a little bit. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. And it just probably me. All right, so Vroom is a national early learning initiative that really helps to make the most out of every moment that you share with a child. So it takes the science of early child development and makes it actionable for you and me, for anyone who's interacting with young children and families. It is not a program. A lot of people refer to it, but it's really meant to be layered on to existing programs, added to existing activities that are already occurring in our communities. And it's really a set of tools and resources that share this science of early brain development. And I'll get into those a little bit later on. But here's a resource that you should definitely take note of. It's the website for Vroom, which is www.joinvroom.org. It's where you can have access to several of the flyers and different activities that I'll showcase throughout this webinar, and where you can get those for your use free of charge, just having access to the web. So next up, I mentioned early on that I started this work in about October of 2015, and I wanted to really let you know that my work is to promote the Vroom initiative throughout King County. And I understand, fortunately, that word of mouth really helps ideas travel. So therefore, the work of you and others with that, Vroom is a tool that's being shared across the state in several different platforms. And so when I started in about 2015, there were around 20 different communities that were actively promoting Vroom. In other words, they had people who were actually working on the ground to ensure that there was information being shared about this tool, that people were understanding the brain science concepts behind it, and that they were accessing the free resources. This particular map that I'm showcasing here is really just evidence of the way that that word has traveled and spread. So obviously all of the orange-colored states are ones that have some sort of activation happening within that community around Vroom. In 2017, the Bezos Family Foundation updated their information to indicate that there were over 100 communities promoting Vroom actively. And so while Washington is highlighted as a state. I know that in particular, I'm working in King County, but there's a lot of work that's going on in Pierce County and some work in Clark County, all throughout our communities that are really trying to push the evidence behind this initiative and really work with families to get them to promote the initiative and utilize it as well. I'm going to pause for a second because I have some feedback from people on the line.
Hi there. Yeah, it looks like we are not muted for everyone that's on the line. So if you could go ahead and mute yourself, if you're calling in by telephone versus on your computer, if you could mute yourselves, that would be so helpful for Devon. And thank you, Fran, for typing in that you could hear us. That is really helpful, and we will go ahead and keep going.
Fabulous. Thank you all for being here and for paying attention at this point. Moving forward, I did talk a little bit about Vroom work in King County, and before I started in my role, the Bezos Family Foundation actually conducted their own pilot work of Vroom. They worked with the Community Center for Education Results and were actively trying to coordinate activities with about 30 different community-based organizations. Their focus was on South King County, and so they definitely worked with programs who were interacting with families in that area. And I'm going to pause again, and we're hearing some feedback from some people. Hello?
Hi there. If you are calling in from your phone, or if you have speakers or a microphone with your computer, could you please be sure to go ahead and mute yourselves so that others cannot hear you? That would be very helpful.
Okay, my apologies, everyone. We're just going to go ahead and press forward. I'm hoping that you don't have too much difficulty hearing me. I'll try to speak slowly and as loudly as possible. So I was mentioning that in 2014, Bezos did a pilot effort for promoting the Vroom initiative throughout South King County. And there are several different public health programs that were interested in and actively participated in that pilot work. And as a result, the whole Department of Public Health really took a huge interest in integrating the Vroom initiative within our programs. And so I was hired on to do the big lift of that work, allowing me to work with our programs and additional initiatives, as well as within the broader community, to really promote the Vroom initiative. And we're continuing to do that, really trying to find these organizations, coalitions, and other entities that really want to promote and connect and engage with Vroom in a very integrated way. So now I'm going to move into a bit of the science behind Vroom, because that's really what we're here to talk about today. I really want to share ways that this science can be adaptable to your lives and your loved ones. Vroom is a tool that is based on the latest early brain development research. So it helps to give us a picture of what's happening in a young child's brain in the first 5 years of life and what you and I can do to help that brain grow. And so for that, it was designed to work within existing daily routines of parents, caregivers, and families, and within existing programs that reach parents, caregivers, and families. So again, I'll preference by saying that Vroom is not a standalone program. It's one that's meant to be layered into additional organizations. Okay. So with that, the staff at the Bezos Family Foundation really wanted to make sure that they were working and doing everything that they could to ensure that this tool was connected with science. In front of you, you have a picture of the Vroom Brain Trust. And this Vroom Brain Trust really has been to engage not only people who worked with Vroom intimately, but also those who have worked across the nation with Vroom. So you'll see.
Marissa. Oh,
Hello.
Marissa over here.
Hello.
Come on to read me.
My apologies. It got a little loud there for a second. But this Vroom Brain Trust is really just a group of individuals, national science advisors, as well as some of those who are located here locally at the University of Washington. All of these people have gotten together to inform different aspects of the Vroom initiative. In the work that they've done, not only reach scientific advisors, but you'll see from this brain trust listing in front of you, parents, and in particular, I'd like to point out dads who have been involved in this effort. I'm going to go ahead and take another pause here because we have a technician who might be able to help us with that background noise. I'm sure you guys are having a bit of a difficult time hearing me. Tell everybody to switch your microphone. Should left this button. Okay. Oh, you're using both? Yeah, sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Build around John. I was gonna go kind of loud, but I saw Alex's name at 1 o'clock, so I was like, find that space. Of course, I picked the one that I'm gonna move in. Yeah. Of course.
Y lo que tomamos es información con tu dirección o la de dirección y verificamos tu dirección de cuestión, y las horas y días que Here. So, the reason they don't know that over there, sí, ya recibe por correo electrónico, y se hace contacto que no va a hacer. Ahí viene los costos dependiendo de verdad. Y hay ciertas guarderías que no tienen esa información en lo que nos dan para los reporteros, si no viene ahí. Entonces es algo que tiene que L-I-N, yeah. So primero,
Okay, facilitators. Again, my apologies. We're just having a little bit of difficulty with some inability to mute some people. So I'm hoping that that will get resolved pretty quickly here. But I'm going to go ahead and move us forward just a little bit so that we're not too far behind on our time. So in thinking about this science behind Vroom, we also have to consider what is happening in the brain for an infant. So, Vroom was created with the firm belief that children are born with tremendous potential and that much of that potential begins to show itself in the first 5 years of life. So, a child's brain develops more rapidly during these first 5 years of life than at any other time. Now, it's not where the brain building stops, but it's the place for the most impact on positive brain development. So we know that the infant's brain is the most immature organ in the body, that it's definitely increasing in size. And a lot of that has to do with the relationships that the baby and the infant are experiencing in those very early moments of life. But I really want to point out that this is not only an opportunity, it's also a vulnerability. So this is where things can really be strengthened. It's like the magic that's happening when we're trying to develop a baby's brain. Another way to really think about this brain growth and development is that it's sequential. It's like the building of a house. Early brain development really lays the foundation for all future development. So instead of using hammers and nails and wood and other materials, a child's brain is really being built by experiences and interactions. And the quality that early brain development carries forward and determines the quality of the brain development that follows. So without repair, how an infant brain develops sets the path for that child's development throughout the child's life. This is what's meant by the earliest years of brain development and how they're both an opportunity to set into motion optimal development as well as a vulnerability if the environment is not filled with quality relationships. To take another look at these early experiences that affect the development of brain architecture, we know that this architecture provides the foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. So just as a weak foundation in a house can compromise the quality and strength of that home, adverse experiences early in life can impair brain architecture and negative effects lasting into adulthood. So brains are being built over time. They're built from the bottom up, just like that house philosophy that we've been talking about here. The architecture of the brain is constructed through an ongoing process that begins before birth, really, and continues into adulthood. This architecture of the brain is comprised of billions of connections between individual neurons and across different areas of the brain. So these connections enable lightning fast communication among neurons that specialize in different kinds of brain functions. It's important to keep that going. The interactions of genes and experiences shape the developing brain. So although genes provide the blueprint for the formation of brain circuits, these circuits are reinforced by repeated use. So a major ingredient in this developmental process is the serve and return interaction between children and their parents. Serve and return is a concept that we'll get into just a little bit later in our life. We also know that cognitive, emotional, and social capacities are intertwined throughout the life course. The brain is a highly integrated organ, and its multiple functions operate in coordination with one another. And in addition, I'd like to just mention that toxic stress weakens the architecture of the developing brain, which can lead to lifelong problems, not only in learning and behavior, but also in physical and mental health. So experiencing stress is an important part of healthy development, but toxic stress, that activation of the stress response, produces a wide range of physiological reactions that prepare the body to deal with threat. When that stress remains at high levels for significant periods of time without supportive relationships to help calm them down, we have this toxic stress. And this can impair the development of those neural connections, especially in the areas of the brain dedicated to higher order skills. This is another slide that I like to share. It comes from the National Science Council of the Developing Child, located at the Center on the Developing Child, which is with Harvard University. And it really just kind of expresses or showcases how important it is at specific moments in time, really that first year and first few years of life, how important that is, and that learning is still continuing to happen as children grow. But some of those most fundamental concepts, we have sensory pathways, language, and higher cognitive function that are pointed out in this particular site. Those concepts are developed really during the early years of a child's life. So it's important that we spend as much time focusing on these years that we can to really set our children up for some of the most positive influence that they'll have in their lives. Now, again, another aspect of that positive brain development is attachment. So we really have to keep in mind how important relationship building is for human beings. We're born seeking these connections, and they have a direct impact on our brain development. So, of course, the more positive these relationships and interactions are, the better the outcome. But being that we're human beings that are hardwired for relationships, it's just great that we have people who acknowledge that our first teachers, and I would often say our best teachers, are those parents or those other caregivers who are there from the moment a child is born and really continue to nurture and positively affect them throughout their lives. Now, this is typically a game that I like to play, and it's a grouping of brain development progression cards, and I'll just really kind of tell you what it really looks like. These are examples of neural connections that really take place in the brain. For these particular neural connections, it really is focused on a positive adult-child relationship and how that impacts the development of a child. So what you'll notice here is that, of course, with a newborn, there's not very many neural connections taking place or that are showcasing as connected. And as that newborn continues to grow and develop and interacts with that positive adult in their life, those connections will begin to create density in the brain. When we get to the point of about 4 years, that density is really showing through. It's very strong and important. Unfortunately, the 6-year density card did not come through here. But what I wanted to showcase with that, because this will be available to you at a later point, is that those connections tend to drop off around the age of 5. And that's because the brain does this thing with itself to become more efficient, where it starts to prune some of those connections that really haven't been solidified or that it no longer needs. So you'll see with a 6-year brain development card that the density is a little bit less than 4 years, and it's because during that age around 5, our brains naturally begin to prune on their own. It doesn't mean that we're losing anything that we've learned. It just means that we're making those connections that are in fact strong and positive that much stronger and positive. Oh, and there it is, this 6-year development card. You can see how it's a little bit less dense than that 4-year card, and that's because of the process of pruning. So the activity that, or the concept that I really wanted to hone in on were the 3 key scientific principles behind Vroom, and those are positive adult-child relationships, back and forth, also known as serve and return interaction, and then executive function life skills. Vroom really takes the science of early child brain development and makes it actionable for you and me, parents, caregivers, anyone who is working with young children and families. It utilizes these principles through every tip that it promotes, and all of the resources are designed to share these principles more broadly. We'll go through these concepts one by one, just sort of a deep dive into what they can look like in different communities and how they can be utilized. So, positive relationships with caring adults are essential for brain development. Dr. Sam Wang is an associate professor of molecular biology and neuroscience at Princeton University. While his focus is on early brain development, he calls this period of brain development a constant construction project where babies and small children are putting together the foundation for who they are going to become later in life. These positive relationships are an essential ingredient for healthy brain development. We know that brains are built over time. We sort of made that analogy between a brain building moment as that of building a house. And while genes provide this basic blueprint, those experiences, environment that a baby, a child is living within help to shape the process of development and build that brain from the bottom up. Dr. Jack Schoenkoff, a pediatric researcher from Harvard and director of Harvard's Center for the Developing Child, states that when we talk about how the environment affects young children, we're really talking about, most importantly, the human environment, and we're talking about relationships. There is no healthy social, emotional, and cognitive progression in the absence of relationships. There is no development without relationships. So I'm going to state again, positive adult-child relationships are essential for brain development. Vroom really adds joy to that development and learning process. I'm hoping that we can just take a few moments and have some of you go ahead and type some comments in the chat box. I wanted this webinar to be a bit interactive. So thinking about what you guys do either in your play and learn groups or just with your own children or children that you interact with on a regular or non-regular basis, name something that you do with children in your life to promote a positive relationship. I'll take a few seconds to see what you guys come up with. Maybe we'll name a couple of those, but if you guys could just chat that in the chat box, that'd be great. Oh, there, I see some. Can you write that one down? Well, I guess it's not going to list it. Oh, there we go. Who's this? Oh, who is it? That's it. So read stories and play with Play-Doh. When I explain play and learn to people, the first thing I do is tell them it's about teaching them how to interact with their children, have a warm environment with a calm, sweet voice, give hugs, sing songs. Fabulous. I asked my son about his day, how his day went, what was good or bad, and how we can make it better. It's not about me teaching their kids. Be down on the child's level. Give choices. Encourage sharing and caring and giving different opportunities in our play and learn group to share. Great. I think those are all fabulous ideas. I just wanted to share a quick story because I like to share stories about one thing that I did way before I started this work. So I have a nephew who right now is probably about 21 years old. And when he was first born, he was the first nephew that I had any interaction with. He's the son of my younger brother, and my brother didn't tell me that his girlfriend was pregnant. But we had this baby that came, and he was just this beautiful ball of love. And I really wanted to just shower him and nurture him with all that I could, but I found myself often sticking my tongue out at him just to gauge some sort of reaction from him. And my father used to say, don't do that, don't do that. You know, you're teaching him bad habits. And I thought, well, it's some way for me to interact with him and me to engage with him. So I continued to do that and found that it was a way for us to really begin to promote our very positive adult-child relationship at that point in my life and his life as well. we'll move on. One of the things that I really wanted to do with this webinar was to connect not only the Vroom initiative, but some of the guidelines that you all are following when you're facilitating and engaging with your play and learn groups. So these are some of the guidelines that I pulled. Now, I know that there's a lot of correlation between these guidelines, but these are the ones that I pulled that I think really specifically relate to the positive adult-child relationship scientific concept of Vroom. And it's just really around the fact that we all learn by interacting with others and with the support of people who care about us. And we also learn in the context of our families and communities. I believe that parents have a great role of building their children through their own cultural lens. And I think that parents can do that very effectively. And we're here just to provide some information to help that development continue to happen in the most positive way possible. The second concept that Vroom really focuses on that's scientific is serve and return, or again, back and forth. Those two words are used interchangeably. But this serve and return interaction, this is where the brain architecture is really shaped. So when an infant or a young child babbles or gestures or cries, an adult responds appropriately with eye contact, words, or a hug, neural connections, those connections that we saw in the brain development progression cards, those are being built and strengthened in the child's brain through that support, and they develop communication and social skills. So it's very much like having a game of tennis or volleyball or ping pong where you do necessarily have to go back and forth. And it can be both fun and capacity building. So when caregivers are sensitive and responsive to a young child's signals and needs, they provide an environment that's rich in serve and return experiences. Because responsive relationships are both expected and essential, their absence is a serious threat to a child's development and well-being. And building the capabilities of adult caregivers can help strengthen the environment of relationships that are essential to children's lifelong learning, health, and behavior. We're going to move on to another chat box activity. I'm going to give you guys just a couple of seconds to type or give us an example of a way that you exhibit serve and return, or that you've witnessed serve and return, something that you guys do in your groups or with the children that you interact with that really kind of showcase this. Just a couple of seconds to type in the chat box there. All right. Baby coos and the teacher coos back. Fabulous. Yeah, that babbling gesture is probably one of the most popular things that we do. I'm looking for a couple more. So we have one that I find that when an infant cries and a mom doesn't respond, I can intervene with a line or two of a song, and it startles the child silent. I've done this a couple of times. The child points and says ba, and the teacher says yes, ball. Very good. I dance or sing with them. Fabulous. Those are great examples of serve and return activities. And continuing on with my story with my nephew, so I was sticking my tongue out at him, and he eventually got around to the point where he would stick his tongue back out at me. So we played this game of going back and forth, and over time really kind of came to the point where that was how we interacted with and greeted each other. So as my dad thought it was a bad habit that I was teaching him, my nephew really came to utilize this as a way of relaying to me his feelings at the moment. His mother and father had gotten into a huge argument. There was a lot of tension in the setting, and they called me to come over because they just could not calm my nephew down. He was crying uncontrollably and was inconsolable by both of his parents. Understandably so, because they were both very upset and just didn't have the capacity to soothe him and calm his needs or work for his needs at the moment. So I arrived at the house and immediately picked him up. And once he sort of stopped the crying, he was doing that shaking crying thing, and really kind of calmed down and realized that I, as a person, was holding him, was not connected to that tension that was going on in the household at the time. He kind of snuggled into my arms and raised his head towards my face, and the first thing that he did was stick out his tongue at me. And I thought that that was so amazing. My heart was really, really touched because, like I said, that was his way of communicating with me. He was about 6 months old at the time, so he really couldn't say how he was feeling, but that let me know that he was going to be okay and that he just needed someone there who could soothe and comfort him. And I was that person who was able to give that to him. So I immediately stuck my tongue back out at him, and we were able to move forward in a very playful and positive manner that really kind of helped comfort him and continue to give him some soothing in that very tense time of need. This slide is something that I think is pretty cool. I found this little comic strip that really sort of highlights serve and return. So I know you guys can read for yourselves here, and this PowerPoint presentation will be available to you guys after the webinar is closed. So you'll be able to take a more in-depth look at it if you like. But it's really about a mom interacting with a child who, of course, can't speak, and she's just like this child just doesn't speak in very coherent sentences. I don't understand what he's saying. And we have this commentator who comes in and really says that the serve and return interaction is the most meaningful conversation that everyone has. It really does support a child in their ability to communicate as they continue to grow and develop and will interact with others later in life. So you see in the last panel of the comic strip that the mother is actually sitting with the child and is communicating in that very incoherent language, but they're going back and forth, and that really is working to build the child's brain. Also, in making the connection between the goals that you have as Kaleidoscope Play and Learn facilitators, I see that these guidelines, again, align with the scientific concept of serve and return. So we learn best when we're valued and respected, and we learn best when we are healthy and our basic needs are met. So definitely emphasizing that first point about being valued and respected. What really encourages children to interact and take a chance with an adult is that feeling, I think, that they are safe and that they'll get a response from what they're doing. So I really just wanted to make that alignment between these Vroom scientific concepts as well as the Kaleidoscope Play and Learn guidelines. The third and final Vroom scientific concept is executive function life skills. These are the skills that are the mental processes that enable us to plan, focus attention, remember instructions, and juggle multiple tasks successfully. It's really just as there's an air traffic control system at a busy airport that's safely managing their arrivals and departures of many aircraft on multiple runways. The brain needs this skill set to filter distractions, prioritize tasks, set and achieve goals, and control impulses. So when children have opportunities to develop executive function and self-regulation skills, individuals and society really will experience lifelong benefits. And these executive function and self-regulation regulation skills depend on three types of brain function, and those are really working memory, mental flexibility, and self-control. They're highly interrelated, and the successful application of executive function skills requires them to operate in coordination with one another. Then we also know that children aren't born with these skills, but they are born with the potential to develop them. So if they don't get what they need from their relationships with adults and the conditions of their environment, or and in worst case scenario, if those influences are sources of toxic stress, their skill development can be seriously delayed or impaired. But adverse environments resulting from neglect, abuse, and/or violence may expose children to toxic stress, which disrupts that brain architecture that we talked about and impairs the development of executive function. So it's really important to make sure that we have these environments that are positive and that are definitely supportive to children as they're developing. And it's critical in this particular time that we're focusing on those early years, and providing the support that children need to build these skills at home and in early care and education programs in other settings like your play and learn groups they experience regularly is one of society's most important responsibilities. So we all have a responsibility to provide these growth promoting environments that will help children with scaffolding, and that helps them practice the necessary skills that they need to have before they have to perform them alone. And adults can facilitate in this development, just as you do in your play and learn groups, just as I attempt to do in my promotion of the Vroom initiative, just as others do throughout the course of the lives that we lead on a daily basis. I wanted to again open up the chat room to ask you guys to comment on this next example of executive function life skills. It's right there. So if you can, either give an example of an executive function life skill, or even better, a way that you utilize these skills in everyday life. So something that you do or something that you try to promote in your play and learn settings. All right. I'll give you guys just a couple moments to think about that. It might be a little bit harder than the previous questions that I asked. Okay, here we go. So the ability to wait for one child to play with a toy when asked to share. Great. Yes, that is definitely an example of that. Exhibiting that patience. Modeling behavior is another executive or function skill example. Do we have any others? Using timers to help with teaching, sharing. We have one who models how to clean up after themselves after the activity. Great. All right. These are fabulous. Thank you all for sharing. These are great ways that we sort of try to interact with children and encourage the development of those executive function life skills. Now, I'll also just share an example of how I try to promote these. And typically when I'm giving a presentation about Vroom, I'm standing in front of an audience. So I try to make people get up and move. I don't like for those nodding heads to be in the audience when I'm standing up there. I'm sure no one really cares for that. But one thing that I do is and I don't practice this, which is interesting. I tend to let people know to do this on their own, but it really sort of pulls on our memory and maybe some of our own childhood experiences. So I often sing the song Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes. And with that song, there are those hand actions that go with it. We touch the head and the shoulders, the knees and the toes, and the eyes and the ears, and the mouth and the nose. And then once we've done that a couple of times together, I ask the audience to actually do that particular song by singing it forward. So we sing head, shoulders, knees, and toes, but then we do the hand gestures in the reverse. So instead of touching my head, I'm touching my nose when I'm singing that part. And what that really does is it calls on us to really focus in on what we're doing. And focus is one of those most important executive function life skills that we can develop, but also because I'm often speaking to adults and people who are working to promote the Vroom initiative in their own programs and with families that they interact with, it's allowing us to pull from our working memory. So some of us will remember singing that song as a child and just trying to remember those actions. I mean, it seems like it's second nature to do them forward, but when you're challenged to do them backwards, you have to then focus and you're pulling on that memory so that you can complete the activity in that way. And that's just a way that we continue to engage our executive function life skills throughout life. And it's one that I like to showcase in our activities when we're talking about Vroom. So here's another, just I think a cute little diagram that really kind of showcases some of those executive function life skills. According to Vroom scientists, executive function refers to the top-down neurocognitive processes involved in the flexible, goal-directed problem-solving aspects of our lives. Executive function involves managing thought, action, and emotion to achieve goals. So I mentioned that focus, being able to pay attention, working memory, or, it's like playing a game of concentration. Cognitive flexibility, so knowing that you can shout on the playground but not in the classroom. And inhibitory control, or probably the willpower that we utilize, really are those four sort of executive function life skills components that Vroom really sort of capitalizes on in the development of the initiative, but also the promotion of the activities that come along with it. And again, tying this particular scientific principle to the Kaleidoscope Play and Learn guidelines, and also acknowledging that while there are these sets of guidelines, they definitely interact with and encompass all of the scientific principles, so can be utilized in a repetitive manner. But we learn through trying and experiencing new things and through discovery and play. And I think that's really important for us to understand and to recognize as we think about that development of executive function life skills. And then again, also that we learn best when we're healthy and our basic needs are met, and that learning and success requires this whole person approach. So it's really that continuous and full body development. We're focusing on brain development here, but that really does engage our whole body and the whole person approach as we continue to move forward and become successful in life. All right. So I'm going to try to put this just into a little bit of perspective more about Vroom and how Vroom uses the science. So here I have just a scattering of different pictures that really sort of showcase an opportunity for brain building, or is in fact brain building itself happening. You see this one where this mother and child are sort of responding to one another. There's a couple of girls who are apparently playing dress up and looking very cute, I might add. But these are all opportunities where brain building can happen, and we're just, focusing on this opportunity can make or create the most positive of development in children that are very young and as they continue to grow and develop over time. And Vroom uses his science by really making it actionable and showcasing how you can engage in brain building with the tasks that you have to complete every day. So here are just a scattering of some of the Vroom materials that are utilized to promote the messages of brain development. So every moment can be a brain building moment. We see a father playing with his child, and he was likely just feeding him in that chair, and now taking the opportunity to stretch that interaction just a little bit further. And then a parent and child or family actually looking like they're doing some sort of laundry and just really interacting around the differences that they're seeing in the clothing laying in front of them. And then a mother and child really playing with hair. And what little girl doesn't often play with hair when they're young? I know I had some dolls and I often combed their hair. So I think it's a great opportunity for just recognizing that brain building moments are all around us, that brain is growing most rapidly in the first 5 years of life, and that we as parents and caregivers already have what it takes. It's just making the concerted effort to engage with children that really promotes this brain development and interaction. Vroom also has a set of brain building basics, and it takes the 3 scientific principles and really breaks them into actions that make any moment a brain building moment. So you can think of these 5 steps as really ingredients for a brain building moment. When you're looking, you're making eye contact with your child, or you're sharing a focal point. So they may be pointing at something and you're pointing at something else, and you guys are talking about that. Follow, letting your child lead the way and you follow by responding. I know there were some examples of that when I asked you all to respond in the chat box. So definitely a way to make any moment a brain building moment. Chat. So we've talked a bit about, I've shared some examples about even chatting with your child even before they can talk back, how important that is, because it really does help them engage with communication and start to understand inflection and different tones and voices. So it's really important to talk with them even before they can speak. But you all know this. Taking turns, going back and forth and engaging with your child. And then, as I just mentioned, just stretching, making moments longer. You can do that by asking questions or elaborating on what's happening around you. And these are just ways that I really like to take with me and think about whenever I'm in any setting to really make that setting a brain building moment. Specifically to emphasize that in order to do Vroom or to do brain building, you don't have to have extra things around you. There's no need to go out and buy expensive toys. You can really just utilize what's in your environment to make a brain building moment happen. So I have a video that I'm going to attempt to play, and we'll give you guys just a few minutes to watch this. Oh, I don't think it's going to let me do it. Maybe if I do it here. Here we go. Okay. Fabulous. Thank you all for paying attention there. So that was the brain building basics live and in action, and just showcasing how you can utilize stuff around your house and really engage in those 5 different ingredients that will make any environment a brain building moment. So I wanted to just kind of bring us back to Vroom and showcase some of the different resources that are available. Vroom is really it's putting out this information not only about those brain building basics, but also about the scientific principles in the form of tips. And each tip is paired with an activity as well as what we call the Brainy Background. And the Brainy Background is where you'll find the information that supports the skills that are being developed by that child interacting with you as an adult in this particular activity. So for this particular activity, it's about his hair, her hair. So you're brushing your child's hair during the day, and it's allowing that child to really understand categorization and the important skill of identifying what's the same and what is different. So you'll see that Vroom activities are designed to prompt brain building moments throughout the course of our everyday lives. And as I said, a parent does not need to have really more time in their day or spend extra money in order to complete them. They're moments that can take place in things that you already have to do every single day. Another resource that Vroom offers to parents and families and those who interact with parents and families is called the Brain Story Flyer. And this really offers a great visual of how a brand new brain learns and grows. So really kind of reading from the top to the bottom, we know that a child is born with a brand new brain that is really ready for anything. From day one, neurons are connecting, and that brain is learning like lightning. It's continuing to make these connections as fast as possible. So those neurons connect very rapidly. A key component of learning and growing is communication. So communication is really key. And even before they're old enough to talk, babies are looking, listening, and relating to you. And oftentimes we use this hi baby kind of voice, this parent ease type of communication in order to interact with the child. I stated earlier that's one way that a child really learns about communication, and it's how they start to understand inflection and tone in voices. So you are a brain builder, you're nurturing future greatness, and Vroom is something that can show you how to continue to do that. This next Vroom tip, I really just thought about including here specifically because of the timing of this webinar. So I know that some of you as facilitators have taken a break over the summer and will be starting your groups again. And I'm sure that some of you or your participants have children who may be heading back to school or getting ready to start school. This particular Vroom tip depicts an activity for families that are really on the go. So it's Imagination Station. It's, again, again, set up as all Vroom tips are. So it has a description of an activity, and then it gives the Brainy background. This particular activity is focused on the age range of 3 to 5 years. So really kind of incorporating that getting ready for school and going back to a routine type phase. So focusing on that particular audience. And I'll say here that all of the Vroom tips, the ones that I've showcased here, that video that we just watched, all of these things are available for free download and to print, both in English and Spanish, on that www.joinvroom.org website that I mentioned. And there's also a select number of tips that are available in Vietnamese, Chinese, and Russian. So if you go to that website, you can have access to all of the Vroom resources, as well as some additional videos that can showcase some of these learnings if you'd like to watch those for yourself. And the last resource that I'd like to share about Vroom is around the Daily Vroom app. So while there are a lot of Vroom tips that are available on the website, the app is really where you get the most bang for your buck. And it's something that's free for download on both Androids and iPhones. What's nice about the app is that it gives you access to over 1,000 tips and the ability to find a tip in the moment. So for example, if you're waiting for a bus at a bus stop and you want to engage with your child, you can pick that category and the app will randomly select an age-appropriate tip for you instantly. Again, these tips are organized to give you an idea of an activity and then to also give you the Brainy background so that you'll really understand the skills that that child is developing by engaging with you in that activity. And then it keeps a log of the activities that you've done so that you can either do them again, share them on social media, or even come up with your own and suggest your own to the Vroom developers. If you do that, they will definitely put them into rotation. They'll pair them with the science to make sure that they are meeting the scientific principles, and then you might even see it in the app as well. So because you all are working with parents and caregivers and bringing them into settings where they can play and children can learn, I wanted to just give you some quotes that you can utilize for really promoting Vroom with parents and caregivers. So it's really important to emphasize that fact that the brain develops most rapidly during these first 5 years of life. And like we stated earlier, it's like the building of a house. So it needs this strong foundation in order to continue to build up that structure. Parents and caregivers have a wonderful opportunity and play a very important role. I mentioned that not only are they the first teachers, but they're also the best teachers I think a child has, especially during that very early time in life. Vroom was created to make the most out of interactions that parents and caregivers already have with their children, so they continue to support that brain building journey. And that Vroom is also based on the latest developments in science. There's been a lot of work that the Vroom advisors have done and have gotten a lot of counsel from the University of Washington's Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences in order to continue to make these scientific connections to the Vroom initiative. And lastly, just to sort of round it out with the key messages that you as Kaleidoscope Play and Learn facilitators share with your caregivers. And again, it's that important role that they play in the children's development, that they're learning to play through relationships and interaction, and that children don't need these expensive toys, and everyday activities are really full of teachable or brain building moments. So I want to take a moment to thank you for joining us for this Vroom and Brain Science webinar in spite of all the difficulties that we have, but also ask if you have any questions that we might be able to answer for you. If you do, go ahead and type them up and we'll take a look. So, okay. Yeah. I see a note about, okay. All right, so yes, those videos are available on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you search for Daily Vroom, you will get a whole listing of different types of videos that the Vroom staff have developed. And what I really want to point out is that some of those videos are also where tips have been brought to life. So it's really important to you can see the way that people have really engaged with tips in their own homes and other places as well. And for the point about seeing tips in Somali and Amharic, great idea. That's actually a part of the new role that I'm working on with public health, is really trying to not only just get tips available in additional languages, but really make some cultural connections to what those other communities are focusing on as a part of their brain development activities. So making sure that it makes sense, but it's something that we're moving forward on. So we'll definitely make sure that we can share that information as it comes out. And thank you all for the thank yous. I really appreciate it. All right. Any other questions? I don't think so. Okay.
Well, thank you all again for participating in today's webinar. I'm really excited about all that Vroom has to offer, and it really does align really well with what you're all doing already in your Kaleidoscope Play and Learn groups. So I will go ahead and upload this webinar onto our YouTube channel. If you want to share the link with others in your organization who might benefit from it, or if you want to watch it again. Again, I apologize for our technical difficulties with being able to mute everyone. I hope that wasn't too distracting. And if you do come up with any other questions, Devon's contact information is there on the last slide, and always feel free to get in touch with me if there's anything that I can help you with. So thanks again, and until the next webinar. Bye-bye.